whether or not to. So I thought that the pilot project was to look at the global marketplace. And that the first step was that everybody on the committee is committed and that they understand the SIFA plan in its entirety, but not necessarily, we're only dealing with a component of the global marketplace. Is that how you see it as well? Or everybody else?
I am at your service.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I
just don't want
think
to
so.
spend 4 months or 6 months doing it, and then it's like this is not what was expected, right?
I
No,
think
no, no, you already gave it an aim. You already said, if we're going to do it, we must also make sure we have a side event in which it is mentioned. And we could mention this as well as the SIFA plat, which would sort of cover all
Okay.
bases. So, that was your very good and important suggestion. So that's certainly something that's happening. And for the rest, the form you want to give is whatever you want. Before I left, there was one thing I did mention, and that is, oh, excuse me.
you're
Can I get,
muted.
can I get back to you later? I'm on a call. I'll be right back to you in about 2 hours, okay? Talk to you then. No, I'm on a call.
okay.
We're being recorded.
Okay, you're somewhat muted, Lisinka. We can't hear you.
Yeah,
Okay, now you're
I'm
good.
trying to find you.
You're
Can
good
you,
now.
I'm trying to find you back. One moment. I'm sorry for the interruption. So the only thing that I did write before I left, and you might have found a way around it, but I'm convinced that we can't do the financing. The financing is at the global level. It can only work at the global level. If you have everybody who participates in the marketplace, then you just get the $50 or whatever per annum, or 250 or whatever it is. You get this very small amount, but for that you need to have everybody on the marketplace, so that's why it wouldn't work in terms of the financing.
Oh,
In
let's think
terms,
if I could, because that's one of the agenda items for that I proposed for today. We need to really understand what our purpose is with the pilot, and we need to understand, what is the ultimate goal, because the pilot is just intended as a step to enable us to implement the entire SIFA plan. So that's part of what we want to nail down, because one of the key things on the committee, which we'll be formalizing here shortly, is really that we have consensus, that we're all coming at this from the same place and the same page. Because I think that's been a problem that we've had in the past, is that different people have different understandings and different priorities. If we're going to actually do something,
you
we have
mentioned,
to
yes,
agree.
to us as being the principal idea for today. Yes, I
Mhm.
understand that. Yeah.
So,
So we
so if
have
we
to
could,
get
if we could hold that discussion that you were just mentioning about the limitations on what
yeah.
we can do in a pilot, because that was what we were really trying with our survey last week, was to try to get across the idea that we might have certain aspects that we cannot do in the full extent in the pilot. We realized in the survey that we did last week that there were still variations of understanding on that. So we discussed that in last week's meeting, and that's on the video from last week. But now what we want to do today is make sure that we really have nailed that point down, and we're able to move forward to define, because the first step we defined for the project in general, for the pilot in general, the first step here is that we come to an agreement as to what features of the SIFA plan can be included in the pilot. What ones do we want to include in the pilot? The second step is to then come up with the specification, the detailed specification of how the pilot would work. And the third phase is step is to define the process by which we would develop and implement the pilot. So we're still on that first step right now. We want to nail down what the features are, and that includes understanding how those features are important to the overall SIFA plan, but then also understanding why there might be some limitations as to what parts of it we're going to be able to do during the pilot. So I'm going to want to bring up, if I could just share my page. Did everybody get a chance to see the draft agenda that I sent out?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, I looked at it.
I didn't get the whole agenda, but I did understand we'd be discussing the points you just mentioned. So please don't spend time on me. Let me just listen in and catch up and etc. as you go along.
okay. Let's see here if I can just share that now.
Light beard on, it's the sunshine, okay?
Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay, can everybody see that part of my screen there that I'm sharing? That was the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so the suggested agenda, the first thing we discussed last week, but didn't get a chance to actually send it out. Joan was explaining here why it's really important that we have a formal team so that different people can take on different responsibilities and we can set up timetables and be more organized, if you would, in doing this. So the goal is to send out a Google form uh, so that those who want to be part of the formal pilot planning committee can so indicate, so that we can then build a structure on that and start to come up with plans and spread out some of the responsibilities. Because if it's just really Joan, Yvonne, and myself, that's going to limit how much we can do and what kind of a time frame, because we all have a lot of things that we're doing. So we need to be able to get to the point where we might even have subcommittees on various aspects. We heard last week there are some systems out there that could be candidates that could do a large percentage of what we're hoping to do. And we're going to need people to look and research those things and be able to report back to the overall committee. It's just like any committee, how any committee works, you've got to be organized. And so the first step on that is to have a solid team of people that are able to take on responsibilities on that. So anyway, that's the first thing I just wanted to say. Didn't get to that this past week, but I definitely hope we will get that out here in the next day or two. The second thing is, last week we spent a lot of time discussing a survey, and I must say, the survey never was sent out to a huge number of people, so I'm very pleased. We have participants from 14 countries on 4 continents that responded to the survey, and in the survey, as we saw last week, the answers really were very varied, and which is part of the reason why we needed to continue the point from last week. But it was very I was very pleased to see how much response that we had to that. Now, one of the first things that we had that we presented in the survey was we were asking people whether there are compelling dependencies to say, oh, you can't do this part unless you do that part for aspects of the SIFA plan, the components of the SIFA plan. And the purpose was to try to distinguish between those things that we're saying, oh, these are must-haves, but from the perspective not of the SIFA plan, because Koistra, when he designed the SIFA plan, it had a number of aspects with different purposes, but those were all put together into one holistic approach. And so, from the perspective of the SIFA plan, they're all very important and have dependencies. But when we go out there and look at the systems that are out there in the world today, we see that for each of the component areas there, that there are examples in operation today that are not dependent on one another, and those dependencies included the idea of the digital marketplace. Is that dependent on having a special currency? Is that dependent on having a decision-making, a sociocratic decision-making process, and so forth and so on? And that was one of the questions. Another question was, is having a special currency, are all the components dependent on that existing? Another one is, if there is a special currency, is that dependent on having a special marketplace, or could that currency actually be used in existing marketplaces? And so the idea here is that we wanted to demonstrate, wanted to get everybody on the same page, that given that we may not be able to implement every single aspect in the pilot, is the understanding that not all of the SIFA components are physically required for the others. So we know there are many e-commerce websites out there that do not require a special currency, and they do not require, or that there be some limitation on sustainability and so forth. We know there's marketplaces like that. We know there's currencies out there. And that marketplaces add various kinds of payment systems and currencies. We know there's various decision-making processes, that the sociocratic approach with all-inclusive is not the only way that works. We also know you can have a sociocratic decision-making process that does not require the economic aspects. So so that was really important to realize, that there are examples already existing for each of the components individually, so that there's not a compelling, from the perspective of, is it physically possible? There's not a compelling dependency on the one to the other. Did we all, after last week's meeting, do we all agree on that point, that that there is not a compelling dependency between the various components of the SIFA plan?
Well, I think
Yeah,
that
I
responses,
actually listened to
Yeah.
the recording yesterday. The whole thing. I just was, as I was doing work, I was listening to the YouTube that you uploaded. Didn't watch it, of course, I could just listen. And so yeah, I think I agree with that. All of these components, they work separately, individually. I mean, that they've been shown, right? You gave examples of many.
Mhm.
It's just, I think the idea is to see if we can bundle them together. And which ones should we focus on? For me, from my perspective, the focus is, of course, the sustainable goods and services.
Yeah. Well,
I
that
think
we're going to get to
that
in
for
the
me
next,
is my priority.
yeah, in the next question on this here. Oh, the next item is to discuss that, but I just wanted to make sure that we all agree that when we look at these components, we don't have to be thinking in our mind, oh, I can't do A unless I also do B. We may want to do both together, but they're not. There's not a dependency. So the next thing we discussed last week then is, what do we feel are most important? If we look at all these components, which of the components do we feel are most important to be included in the pilot? And we saw here there was a broad spectrum of actually, I'll take that back. we had here almost more than 95% of all the participants on the survey all said every one of the components is totally important. So we saw in the discussion last week as we were doing that, we started to say, well, wait a minute. When we look, and some people are saying the sociocratic decision making is absolutely
Wow.
uh,
Good.
that was like almost all but one of the participants indicated that the sociocratic decision making across, including everybody in the world, was a primary importance. So we started to get into the discussion of which of the um, uh, were most important in people's minds, because if we've got people on the committee saying, hey, wait a minute, no, you know what, we can forget the economic aspects, that's not so important. We're trying to make a society where everybody's included and everybody is thinking about what the issues are for the world and so forth. That's the most important thing. If you've got some people saying that, okay, let's drop out the economic aspect then, if that's the case. Or some are saying, no, wait a minute, sustainability, protecting our world, that's got to be the primary thing. We can drop all the rest of the stuff if we can find a way to do that. This is something that was towards the end of the last call was very important, because we have to sort of come to an agreement on the prioritization of these three major directions there, if you would. So that was point 4 that's on the agenda here. What do we see as the primary goal? And Lloyd, you just said from your perspective, sustainability is ultimate, because guess what? If we don't do that, maybe everything else becomes a moot issue in a relatively short time.
Well,
But
it's the reason I'm here.
yes, okay. So let's hear from some others there on your thoughts here on the primary purpose. I sort of take the lifeboat approach. You know, the old story in the lifeboat, you don't have enough water and food for everybody, so you sort of figure out, okay, well, who's got to go overboard first, and basically the bottom line is who goes overboard last. That's the one that's you feel is the most important. So please, if we could get a little discussion on this point going, because I think this is a really crux of the matter. Dr. Muhammad, please. Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Will. Um, I think we need evaluating importance here. While all goals are critical, the emphasis may shift depending on local challenges. For example, in a region facing severe economic hardship, the focus might be on economic inclusiveness first, while in areas dealing with social strife, emphasizing inclusivity and governance might take precedence. I think locally, I think we should evaluating importance about all goals by locally investment or locally assessment.
Mhm.
I think that.
Yeah. No, it's very good that you brought that point up, because as we just heard from Lasinka, there's aspect of the SIFA plan that cannot be done locally. They require a global top-down solution. And so this is part of that important thing that yes, we can say, oh, okay, different parts of the world may prioritize different parts of the solution. But for, just one example, if we end up with a decision-making process as to what products and services can be included, and that has to go roll up to the global level and back down to the grassroots, then that's hard to do and say, okay, some communities they're not going to do that, and other communities will do that. That makes it a little bit difficult to do that. But for the purpose of the pilot, that might be something um, that we can look at or we can discuss. How could we do that so that different parts might prioritize and implement different parts of the overall system on different timetables, for example? Anybody else, please?
Oh, Bill,
Yes,
so we're on number 4.
we're on number 4.
Okay, so are we going through them one by one, or you just want us to give us an overall answer of what the SIFA plan?
No, I think the issue here is for those people who would be on the committee, what do you view as the primary importance? So that if some people say, well, the economic aspect is most important right now, that if we had half the team going and saying, no, we think here governance is more important than the economic aspect, we're going to have trouble coming to consensus and being able to actually build real things. Because in the end of the day, we need a specification for what we're going to actually implement. So I want to bring that issue to the top here, that we discuss what are the perspectives of different people. And we heard from Lloyd, his perspective is the sustainability aspect is most important. Dr. Mohammed said it's going to be different in different locations, so maybe we need to be able to have a flexibility to enable different geographies to prioritize different things.
Right. So in answering that question, first of all, the SIFA plan, I think all of them are important.
Mhm.
It's a matter of which priority, right? Because the SIFA plan says these are the components, so they are obviously important. Um, uh, um, I personally believe that the A and C interconnect really, really well, because if we're saying we're going to have a marketplace for economic access and equity, we have to have some criteria in some way that says we're just not a marketplace like an Amazon that is creating waste everywhere, and it's a central point and somebody's making $100 billion every 2 seconds, right? It's about the local community economic development and currencies that are convenient or accessible to those local communities. And that's the thing that I'm having some struggle with, is if we have an overall dollar, like I'm always asking the question for the SIFA plan, how is it different than what exists today?
Mhm.
Because when it was written, 40 years ago, the world was a very different place. Everybody wanted to be a US citizen or be like the West, because that was sexy and that was what made people civilized, in quotation. Well, we know that's not necessarily true anymore. It never was, but nobody dared say it because it was a marketplace. Now people want to have their own language, their cultural heritage, their own local currencies, and their way of life. So those are the things that's important to communities now. They want to protect their environment in their local community. They want to protect their children's rights, their human rights, never mind anything else. Because that's not even mentioned here, the human rights issue. So I think in terms of the SIFA plan, all of them are interrelated. But if we're going to be bouncing to the marketplace, then A and C
Mhm.
have to go together for the marketplace. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, Joan, what you brought up some very, very important points here for our discussion, and that you're sort of going in the direction of what Dr. Mohammed was talking about. Different places have different priorities, and we need to figure out how does this work if that's the case? Because definitely Koistra's idea is we're going to have a global central bank of the world. And he specifies some very detailed aspects of how the world achieves consensus on this. In other words, what goes on in Togo is not something that the rest of the world doesn't care about. It's we're all interlinked in many ways, and so how do we make that happen? So what I'm hearing here is we need to be able to discuss into the when we start looking at the specifications, how much local independence are we able to have? Because in the end of the day here, very often when we have small production shops, let's say small manufacturing shops, they're much more wasteful and much more inefficient than some of the super big automated manufacturing facilities. So when we look here and say, hey, the sustainability and avoiding waste and so forth is really important. On the other hand, we know if we can build vertical farms in the middle of cities, we don't need to be transporting goods all over the world. And so therefore, we're doing something positive for sustainability by being small and local. So that there's this mixture, and we got to figure out how we do it. But I think here the importance here for this piece of the discussion, and I hope there's agreement there, is that we've got to say, okay, what are we doing about these different aspects of it? Because if somebody is going out there, and I think the human rights aspect is built into B, that the idea of all inclusive, everybody being included in the decision-making processes and discussing what's important and so forth, I think that would cover a lot of the human rights aspect. But let's get more opinions on this. Amos, please.
Yeah. Good day, good afternoon, morning. I think the discussion is going on in the right direction. But may I contribute in order not to prolong the issue? Because all we need now is action. Is for us to pick an area of the world where the needs are already there. Pick a currency that is applicable to that region, area, where the people can easily key in. While we worked further on the global currency that is achievable. Because what we want to do now is test run. The idea. If we begin to project globally, we might miss the whatever is needed right now, the impetus. Let's pick a region where the needs are. Deploy the SIFA resources, technology, based on the economy that is highly or widely circulated in that area. And let's test run it. It is that evidence that we can showcase to the world that this thing has worked in social region. And this is the evidence. And the world can pick it from there. But if we begin to imagine what is going to take over the world and without test running it and providing evidence, we might just be running about, pushing about the bush for so long a time. Well, that's just my little contribution. Thank you.
Actually, thank you, Amos, for that. And I think what I'm hearing from you is I may have the sequence wrong in the agenda, that we maybe should be talking about what's the primary goals of the pilot, to say, okay, we need to provide the evidence that certain aspects work and how they could work. And so, but we'll come to that in a second, but let's hear from Yvonne first.
I agree with Amos and Joan, and we're for Joan. I mean, it's not a competition, but so let's just leave it simple. So all three aspects are very important. The empowerment of governments to help provide supplementary income for their citizens, so those citizens can be free to exchange or build their own lives in one way or the other. and instead of being dependent on a few shekels from the government just to survive. And that was the empowerment vision, I believe, for this platform in its present view. Second, it is allowing individuals and communities for economic development locally and globally. Obviously, you have to start someplace. So generally, those things take place locally or regionally, and then expand. So a pilot makes most sense. Then on the, in order to activate in this new and modern world, we have the ability to just white label a marketplace, make some adjustments, and in that marketplace, we could add Q&A questions about the products or services somebody would like to offer. And that could be something as simple as somebody selling eggs to somebody selling batteries, someone selling solar power to a whole village. Doesn't matter. Okay. And then the third part is the Q&A portion is focused on sustainable goods and services. The reason why this is such a valuable platform and uniquely different is because this SIFA plan will be transforming the world so that it understands what sustainable goods and services are. Because presently, the world does not understand it. Even those who graduate from university or take extra courses just get concepts. But until people have to implement it into their lives in order to participate in something that delivers them benefit, they will not know. So we're impacting the world through understanding what sustainable goods and services, and then creating a pressure on the entire world to produce products and services. For example, like my cell phone emanates radiation, a lot of radiation. That is not a responsible company who's a multi-billion-dollar company. So they would not be allowed on the exchange. And in order to manage these type of things, we talked about the sociostatic or whatever a method of decision making. So there's going to be, so there's a place for disagreement and arbitration and discussion. And so that accomplishes what we had, the more local, global type of thing. Anybody could create local communities as well. And the fourth is the currency. We do not need to use any cryptocurrencies. We don't need to use anything. We, on the exchange, just create a value points per SIFA dollar, for let's say, or a UN dollar. And there's a component of value there. And that we need to just to get a little guidance on how to create that. And then I think so that's why all this is really important and why it's transformational and why we're all participating in this, because we are changing the world. We're supporting governments and supporting their people without competing with the government. We are adding value to the government, and we are encouraging and developing economic development at anyone's level. Everyone's different. And we are preventing speculation, abuse, all these things by the fact that the whatever allotment of $500, let's say, expires at the end of the year. So there will be forced economic activity, and then there is no chance for waste. I mean, for speculation or abuse in that sense. So those are my areas. And so with that long-winded opportunity to speak, and I thank everyone for this opportunity, is the fact that we should just start putting a marketplace together and then work through the issues as we do that. And start local, and as Imo says, find a local area. I may have something in Bahamas in a smaller community. We may have this in Africa. we could maybe do this in Mexico or lots of other places, but we just start with one. And I think we just need to build one platform. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Yvonne. So, what I'm hearing is you basically were agreeing with both Joan and Amos to the degree that let's get primarily the economic aspect and the sustainability aspect. We know we're going to need some kind of decision-making aspect, but that may be not the full-blown bureaucracy that was envisioned for the SIFA plan, at least initially, if I'm understanding you correct, and that then becomes something that can be done relatively quickly. You know, building up a global decision-making hierarchy is not something that we can necessarily do overnight, but we can definitely establish the other points there. Sean, you want to add something there?
And good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bill, and everyone for having me here. I know I've been away for a minute, but I'm back. I'm always working, and I'm excited about the comment that Amos made, and actually Yvonne. I was just reading something the other day about a $200 billion plan that the United States and I think a lot of other countries are coming together to form some type of plan to promote education. And I think it falls similar to what we're doing here with the SIFA plan. And I think that what Amos had pointed out when he said, if you have this pilot and the validity of this pilot and the validation of this pilot with the results could possibly be highly visible and also recognized as something globally that maybe they want to tap in, because you're talking about a lot of embodiments of government coming together to see the world a better place. And I think that's what we all are here for, and that's what we all see in this world. I know that's in fact why I do what I do, is because I want to see the betterment of kids and for us to have a better future, because I'm not going to always be this age. And as I get older, I want to have individuals that we've developed and being able to pass the helm to them and know that we are having a secure future ahead of us. So I'm excited about that. I just want to just say that, and I'll be listening in more and I'll be here more, but I'm definitely interested in this plan, especially with what I do as a motivational speaker. This is just something I'm really, really excited about. Bill and to the team, I'm definitely in on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Yes, Joan.
Yeah, so I just want to say that we're going through the agenda, and so we need to have some sort of structure that we have some benchmarks and some milestones of achieving this. I had mentioned, I think it was to this group, but I know for sure Lysinka, that perhaps if we have something, it is December, if we could have something that we could do at the HLPF as a session in July, which would give us a planning goal to present. It could be the overall vision, it doesn't matter, but just something that so that we get organized, and that our committee, the Common Cluster, has a real project that it has that is meaningful to all of the member states, right? So as a goal, now I'm not saying that we have it all done, but as a big vision to present and to see what the uptake would be from the member states. So that's the sort of the end goal for the next 6 months. I'm not saying that it's going to end there. So then we have to work back. If we're accepting of this, we have to work back on how that's going to happen. So
No, Joan, I appreciate because you're the one that keeps us on focused on results. And so I think that's very important. However, most of you know I'm very involved with artificial intelligence, and I'm very, very concerned at the speed at which things are taking place. So I would really hope that by the high level political forums that we would literally be able to say there's a pilot in progress and not just be able to say, "Oh, here we've now got our specifications done." And I think it's doable. And it sounds, I think, in this early stage, discussing all this theoretical stuff and things like that makes it feel like, oh my, it's going to take us 20 years to come to anything useful. But I really feel that by having these discussions, yes, it's taking more time, but it's going to reduce the problems along the way where people stand up and say, "No, wait a minute, that's not what I was pursuing or thinking." So that's why I feel getting this consensus on these different points. And even though the discussion is bringing up the consensus might be very broad but at least we are all seriously discussing how these pieces fit together so that we can, when we start looking at the specifications for the actual pilot that we believe we can implement, everybody's really given a lot of serious thought to this. But I'd like
Yeah,
to,
so
because in the
yeah, I just want to say, Bill, um, I'm not saying that we exclude any of what you're talking about, and that the consultations will be an ongoing process.
Mhm.
But if we don't have something that we can say, here's what we've tried, and here's what actually worked,
Yeah.
here's what will not work, you can't say that right now. All
Yes.
we can do is pontificate, and I don't want to pontificate. I want to do something.
Yeah.
So there's too much pontificating. I'm on so many groups, and they pontificate about the world changing, and nobody's ever lifted a finger to do anything to change the
No, I
world.
agree 100%. We can see COP is a good example of that. Steph, please.
Yes. So it's like a story that we've told when it started with what Lysinka brought to our group, talking about because of the Eco Village Initiative, Global Eco Village Initiative map that I'm associated with. I'm really familiar with GEN, which is what Lysinka talked about a few times, the Global Eco Village Network. And they have these pilot projects. That's what each community has. They have their own, starting with Orville in India, they have their own currency that has value, also involving work trade within the community, and they have ways to convert to their local governmental currency so they can interact within their own community and be upheld, that be sustained, which is to address Jones. It's like humanitarian. It's a humanitarian thing where everyone has a roof and safety and food and participation, either monetarily or work trade. So we see that it works. I agree with Amos that we should choose a few projects. We know that the system works. GEN is like a micro example of what we want to do globally. So we need to make that en masse, what these communities each do. Some do wind turbines and, Findhorn in Scotland and sustain their entire community's energy needs and even sell back to the local governments and make money that way. And some sell eggs. So I think we should just choose some places and some projects and model that, model what GEN is doing.
Can you just spell GEN in the Eco Village, or
It's
can you add a link?
GEN, Global Eco Village Network.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're all over. I mean, and I've been at different intentional communities globally, and they can totally sustain themselves with food, with energy, with social well-being for the kids and for education. Everybody knows, everybody must participate in the food systems. Everyone must have that knowledge. It's asked of them every week to spend a certain amount of time, and yeah.
There's 10,000 of them, I believe.
Yeah. And we MAP is really a microcosm of that that's trying to focus on conscious community, which means the well-being of the planet and all of its inhabitants, which is exactly what we're talking about here. So like, it's like we've told a story and we're putting all the puzzle pieces, and we should just model that and try to find projects and places on continents and, you know, locations that we want to get that going. You know, one of the eco villages in the Middle East is so sustainable that they have been called into refugee camps all over the world to model en masse what they do in their little communities. Food, water in the middle of, you know, horrific places where there's huge refugee camps, and they're successful in keeping them nourished, at least, you know.
I think this is very interesting, and if you could post any websites or
Sure.
information here in the chat as to where we might start looking at those. But I think this is exactly what I meant by the idea, once we get the committee more formally organized, that this would warrant a subcommittee to say, let's go and take a look at what others are doing that are close to what we're trying to do, because we don't want to waste a lot of time reinventing the wheel. So when we can leverage something somebody's doing, at the same time, we've got to be also very aware of the world around us, because my experience is there are some eco village advocates that are a little bit don't want to know about how the world's evolving and what's going on because they disagree with the direction. For example, the whole idea of artificial intelligence and robotics making human labor useless, developing what Yuval Harari calls the useless class, which would be 90% of all humans. So that probably has the greatest momentum in the world right now, and the greatest push of investors and everybody else.
Yeah. Well, Bill, let's go back.
Yeah.
I mean, you're making great points, but I think we, like you had just, when you launched off the conversation, we look at the eco villages that are reflective, that are making a sense, and implement as we need to.
Yeah.
So,
Oh no, I agree. That's what I'm saying. We need to look at all of them, but we also need to keep an eye on, so we don't go and start building a bridge where the other side is doing something else that makes completion of the bridge impossible. That's all I'm mentioning on that. And it's just that we've got to we have to look at all of these because, as I say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we also don't want to build something that there's no room for in the future.
So I just want to say something. So what I think is really interesting here, and you may all agree, the point is that we have these other programs are great because they live in their own world. And what we are doing here, because we have access to the UN, we have the financing for development conference is coming up. The conference and social development conference is coming up. We have the opportunity to speak and participate and introduce these ideas in a real world opportunity. And that's the difference between those.
Yes.
What we need to do is now just commercialize it to a point, and I don't mean commercialize it in a negative way. I mean commercialize it that it's actually implementable at a regional or government or community level.
Yeah.
So we take what's going on in Eco Village, we look at Lemon, we look at a couple of other facilities, we put together the platform, we put some marketplace images, and we just start playing.
Yeah.
And then we figure out the currency, because there's a lot of we're talking about this stuff now, but we're forgetting about a lot of really high level things that are going to have to be discussed, like the value of $500 in one country versus 500 in another, and what maybe Amos was saying. So there's a lot of other layers that we're going to have to talk about, but let's focus on just commercializing it and getting it to the governments. And that's why I emphasize the point that we are supporting governments with the supplementary income where they are free up of the burden, and these countries and the communities can generate economic trade at the local medium level. And then lastly, we could support youth, we could support people who are uneducated or have other issues, mental health, anything, and give them a chance to create their own companies, their business, or buy extra. All right, thank you.
Yvonne, you said something I think is very, very important. When we look at the idea of most eco villages are inward focused. They're focused on their members and their village. And what the thing you brought up is we are focused on looking how do we better the world. So this is why we look to be able to present ideas to the UN and others where we can find people who share the vision and
I'd
grow
like
the
to
ability.
interrupt here because uh, our big buddy is a representative of Jen. That's Rob Wheeler. And I've visited a number of the eco villages, and they are absolutely not inward looking. They're definitely worldly places, and they exist all over the place. There are those that belong to Jen, and there are those that belong that just exist. I was in the middle of the desert, and I came across an eco village just recently in somewhere in the southern Spain. So we should not put them down. They're incredibly sophisticated. They're very much outward looking. They very much connect to the communities where they're situated. So we should not make any premises of what they are not and what we are. What we do have is what Yvonne points out, and Jen has that possibility too. We can bring it to the UN. Jen is already represented at the UN by Rob Wheeler, but they haven't been very active in sort of getting it to governments, and that's where we can bring it to governments.
Yeah, no, I was thinking what I was meaning by that is that for the most part, I think most of the eco villages, they are not trying to tell the rest of the world you must do what we are doing. I think they are looking and saying, "Hey, those who want to, and those we can do these kinds of things." But they, generally speaking, the idea of a small group of 50 or 100 people saying we want to dominate the world and we want to be able to control everything everybody does, that's not part of their agenda. That's all I was saying. Yes, Joan, and then Sean, and then if we could move on to the discussion because
Okay,
we
so again, we have 6 topics to discuss. I was just wondering, when is this consultation going to be over in terms of this committee, the formalization of the committee, and the answers to the questions, like in agreement, are we agreeing with number 4? So that there's a movement. So are we going to spend the next couple of weeks going through these and then take those and make decisions and forming the committee? Just some structural stuff. So that's the first thing I want to say. The other thing that I want to say is all of existing, not all because I don't know them all, but there are many structures such as Eco Village, I just use that, that have marketplaces and local currencies and things like that. And I think that one of the things we have to do as a committee is to look at the many structures that are available and what they're doing, maybe even invite some of those leaders to come and talk to us about what works, but tell them, here's what we want to do, because this committee is about the global committee. It's not about people having a certain interest in eco village or a certain interest in forestry or certain, you know what I mean? This is for everyone. So what we need to acknowledge and recognize the successes of others. So what are they doing? What can they, how can they help us for one thing? How can they partner with us for what we want to do, which is having a global currency for our members so that everyone can access the marketplace.
Mhm. No, I think here what you're saying here is really important. That yes, we are looking about how do we bring about a vision that we are developing a shared vision of when we're all done. What's this world supposed to look like if we are successful? If we're successful in implementing the SIFA plan, not just the pilot, but the full SIFA plan worldwide, what does that world look like? And therefore, how do we get there? That's our whole discussion: is how do we get there, and to what degree eco villages and other structures are already have taken certain steps in that direction. How do we maybe co-opt that they join and we join forces because we're all trying to head for that same vision of where we're trying to go? So one of the first issues is that we can present that vision of the world that we would like to see when we're all done. And then we're going in the pilot is part of the plan of how we're going to get there, but the pilot fits into a strategy. The strategy is we're trying to get the UN to agree and buy in, if that's what our strategy is, to be able to say, okay, the UN is going to agree, they're going to buy in, they're going to create the UN bank, they're going to a central bank, we're going to create a global currency, we're going to have this global marketplace, and so forth and so on, all these different aspects. Those are steps of our strategy. And then the pilots fit into that this way because they provide the evidence, as Amos was saying, the evidence that it works. What we're talking about works
Right.
and can achieve those results. So this is why it's important that we develop that vision. This is where the end stage that we're trying to get to. And here is our strategy for the path to get there. And here is the pilots that are part of those steps of our strategy for how we're going to achieve the end goal. But I want to at least start because we're more than an hour in right now, and I don't want to have this go more than 90 minutes at the max. So one of the issues, I think, as I said in the survey, everybody sort of said, "Hey, all the things are equally important." Well, let me go. Sean's had his hand up for a while. Let's hear from Sean first, and then I want to go into at least that we say, on looking at the various components, that we just say a few words about each as a start off to be able to say, okay, how could it happen, or how could it maybe not be possible in a pilot? That we start to think, so that in our next meeting that we can start to get into nailing down some brass tacks as to these are features we believe we can include in a pilot. This is why we want to include them. This is what the pilot is intended to prove in our overall strategy of getting to the full implementation. But Sean, please.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for giving me the floor again. I think, in just an observation and just listening to the comments and the concerns, I think we're all that 5-year-old that's looking at the bicycle with the training wheels, and we're just ready to get on the bike. I think that's what everyone is really looking at. They're excited about doing something, and um, I know I am. One of the things I just want to say is Muhammad Sensei that's on here. He and I are working on a program together. I'm in the U.S. and he's in McKinney, West Africa, and we have a program that we help these kids with leadership development, and I train them how to become public speakers. It's interesting because one of our students was just highlighted in Sierra Leone, Africa, and she has now became the head of the school. So I think that what everyone is really saying is, let's just get on this bicycle and ride. I know that Amos was surely sounding like that, and I think Yvette was saying the same thing because we have such a great uh, uh, plan here that they just want to know. It seems like they want to know the next step, like when we're going to get on this bicycle, and we don't have to start riding immediately, but at least let's just test this bike out. I think that that's what everyone is really saying. But those are just some of the things that I am doing currently in Sierra Leone, and we are having tremendous success.
Mhm, mhm.
So thank you.
Sean, how does that help? How does your experience in what you're doing help us move this forward?
Um, I would say, in my experience, just by uh, we have this plan, and what I see is the first step. The first step, in my experience, is taking the first step and having that vision of what that first step is and how we're going to move forward with that first step. That was pretty much what we did with the program that we have. I had a vision of having the kids to overcome the fear of public speaking. Now we have a group of about maybe 10 kids that we meet with, and these kids are not afraid to speak in public, and that is the success of what we wanted to accomplish. How do I see this program with this particular plan? I think that we could just have one thing. It's always one thing that moves us to the next step, and sometimes we don't know what that is going to look like after we take that step. But I do believe in stepping. But also, I want to say what Bill was saying. I can kind of see what he's saying as a proposal to the UN. So, depending on how fast that can happen, depends on how fast we can step.
Yeah, yeah. And I think here one thing that might be very useful at this point is that we look back at the survey results here in terms of the importance of various features. And just a couple of examples there. Obviously, the digital marketplace, it's pretty universal. Everybody says, yes, that we must have that. But at an equal percentage here are saying that we must have the supplementary income for everybody. Okay, so that we're saying, hey, marketplace, yeah, but without the supplementary income, it's uninteresting. Okay, that's an important thing to note, because the next thing they said, and the supplementary income has to be self-financing. So they're saying the supplementary income, a self-financing supplementary income, it must be part of the initial pilot, along with the marketplace. Those seem to be the higher ones. And so how does that fit? Does that somehow does everybody agree that, hey, that should be the focus to create a digital marketplace? We know that's easy, that we can plug into all kinds of existing marketplaces there, or there are marketplaces out there that are open source, that you just literally grab them and can use them tomorrow, and they don't cost anything more than your hosting facility to be able to host them. But that's just the marketplace alone. Doesn't cover payment. It covers just traditional payments. It doesn't question the currency. It doesn't get involved in anything to do at all with the idea of supplementary income.
Okay, but wait. You're going into strategy and implementation. Right now, it sounds like we're all on the same page and we could take a final vote. The first step is sourcing a platform and then entering and developing this marketplace so we could test it out. And that's it. And then we could always add in all those other needs. But right now is not a strategy discussion. It's actually the step right now is like, what's the next step? The next step to me sounds like create a marketplace. And then we implement all these areas that we're talking about and see the problems as we work along the way. Because nothing, you don't know what you don't know until you start.
Yeah.
So
Does
yeah,
anybody have any doubt, however, of the viability of a marketplace? It's one of the things that I've looked at here that I say, a week from now we can have a marketplace. That's not a problem. The question is, I don't know whether that marketplace can be expanded to include the idea of your own currency or the idea, and it has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the idea of a universal basic income or supplementary income, because we know there's many, many, many of those done around the world that have nothing to do whatsoever with any kind of a marketplace. They just
One of the things that you've just said is that on the survey, we all, the people that answered, they also said that you couldn't have a digital marketplace without self-financing. Maybe rephrase some of those questions and send them out again for people to define how do they see that the self-financing will work, because everybody's going to agree to wanting self-financing, right? And having a supplementary income. How do they see that working? That would be my first
Yes,
question.
no, that's a very good point. Actually, I was thinking about trying to do that. It would just got too tight time-wise. But that's exactly the kind of questions that when you
Yes,
look at these five things, how do you envision them working?
that's right. So that's number one. And number two, I want to point out, like, I'm one of those people that like to follow agendas, but however, we need to have discussions as well. But we need to say, okay, what have we agreed on number four? Let's move on. Number five. The number five, I just want to say, if we're going on that, is that I don't think the all of the goals that's in that pilot project is the goals of what we're trying to do. Because our major goal is to, one, create a marketplace, but two is to actually get the UN involved in it. That's what, like we need to do. Maybe what we need to do is a business canvas or some sort of I guess an agenda is one thing, but we need to make the decision and then do the strategy. You can't have both at the same time. We need to agree on these things and then say, okay, we've all agreed on this. Yes, bye. Now let's develop a strategy. And that there has to be some sort of timeline to getting this done. Otherwise, we'll be forever talking about them.
Yeah. Joan, if I could, what I'm hearing a little bit is it would be valuable for us to, if we have our vision of here's where we're trying to get to with the world, with the SIFA plan, to be able to have a sense of what would it take to get the UN engaged, involved.
Yeah.
In other words,
That's what I think that we have to do. And the other thing too, Bill, I just is my fuddy duddy. We keep using the world and the war vision and stuff like that. That's an arbitrary term.
Mhm.
Because most people don't really they want to know what they can do in their local community as people, and the member states are going to want to know what can they do in their countries to help their people. So we have to be very careful. And yes, of course, everybody cares about the world, and we all do, but you can't go in the world and do what you want to do. So a member state is going to say, is going to want to hear, this is how we're developing it, so people in your communities can access it, and here's your role as the member state representative.
I think that's sort of, if you look at the way central banks work, that doesn't mean every local bank is going to interact with the central bank in the same way. If they do, they have to follow the same regulations as everybody else.
Okay, but we're not talking about that. Right
Well,
now, that's again, because you're such a high level person and worked in such large institutions and banks and developed so many things, we need to just stay simple and we just need to execute. And as we get to the currency portion of the platform, first we need a platform. First, we have to figure out the questions that will be asked. And then we also, while we're doing this simultaneously, we come up with some of the currency plan. And that's when we have that conversation. But again, otherwise we're going to keep on talking. We just need to, like I sent out that, I don't know how many people were able to open it. It's just a basic plan of action. I'm running off on different tangents. So just to simplify, let's just keep it simple and be in agreement that we need a marketplace. let's test something out.
Mhm.
Let's have fun with it. We'll figure out the cost. We'll figure out the challenges. We'll see who will do this for free. And then we'll add questions. We'll add items. We'll add currency. We don't need to work with any banks because it's an
No,
enclosed
that's not what I was,
marketplace.
that's not the direction I was going in, Yvonne, I was just trying to point out that the idea of a central bank is like the idea of a McDonald's. A McDonald's, just because their headquarters comes out with say a certain menu item doesn't mean every store is going to do it. They just make it available. The central banks make facilities available to local banks. Local banks don't have to do that. The UN can make solutions available. Not every member state is going to take advantage of those in the same way. So that's all I was trying to point out. I wasn't trying to say banks, other than I was doing it because that relates to the SIFA plan a lot. But I'm thinking here, we want to nail down, as Joan said, let's go and say, are we all in sync on number four? What I heard is from many of you, A and C, the economic aspects and which is the marketplace and any kind of income aspect, and the sustainability are the priorities that we're looking at. And am I correct in that understanding?
I think yes.
From what I've heard, yes, that is, I think, the priorities.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like I said, I'm here because what we're trying to do is what we say, localize the global goals, the
Yeah.
implementation of solutions for achieving the sustainable development goals. And
Mhm.
that's
Okay.
a big part of
So just so
why I think
we
we do a lot of this stuff, right?
so we have that on record that the priorities that we're looking at right now are in those two directions, and then through the idea here is when we look and say, okay, within that, the marketplace is sort of stage one. If we have a marketplace, then we can start to look on what we can add into it. But in that regard, and this is where we need to go and have that committee, for example, that's looking at the options for the marketplace, for the physically doing it, given that A, we've got to make it available in almost every language of the world. And
Not for the pilot.
pardon?
You don't have to talk about
No,
all
no.
those
Well,
languages
no,
for the
no.
pilot.
It
The
does. No,
pilot's
we
only
don't.
the community, the language they
Yeah.
speak. Could
No,
be
no. We
French or
don't. Yeah.
English or whatever.
We don't need to. It doesn't need to be in the pilot, but it has to be capable of, because otherwise,
Eventually, but that might be years down
Okay,
the
but
road.
exactly. So that goes back to the product development, where these are really important, super important and relevant items and to consider. But right now, it's just, are we going to create the marketplace?
yeah.
Okay, and then we just start with what's available and incorporating it, and maybe having like a working session about like the things that need to be the areas that are relevant, which is like ability to change language, ability to do XYZ, have a little bank account in it, this, all these different things. And then as we're looking for a partner, because I feel very strongly somebody will do this for free.
I,
I think, yeah, I think as we look for a partner, then we could have the checkoff list, and then they could always, either have those items in their portfolio already of services and capabilities, or we request and they develop it.
Mhm.
Uh, that's it. It's really simple. I've been part of technology development, APIs, and you name it, trucking platforms, digital security, smart contract development technology, trading technology. It's really not. It's pretty. It's pretty mainstream.
Yeah, and
So
there's
we're
even companies like Amazon themselves offers the ability to for individual solutions to plug into variations of themselves. So all up and down the line, there are potential partners out there to be able to move relatively quickly on that once we decide.
that's why you have that expertise, right? And that expertise is very, very valuable. But I guess I think in order to move everyone forward, and follow your agenda, and the urgency that everyone seems to be sharing, is let's just start something, and then and that something is the marketplace, so we have something to prove to the government. So if I'm at the fact, Cynthia, I requested that I attend the Financing for Development conference. And so there's a lot of opportunities to speak there, or the Commission for Development, or I know EcoSoc chair. I am very fortunate. I'm in New York. We could do anything we want if we have something proper to deliver.
Yeah,
okay?
and yeah, PrepCom's coming up very soon, Yvonne. So we need to talk about how you would bring the SIFA plan there, and also possibly talk about the pilot project, depending on how far you are.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we could do this next week, like we literally within 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing here right now, for next week, one, we need to get out the formal committee membership form, so that we then say, here's the formal committee, and then we start looking how we get that organized. So with certain subcommittees that have certain focus and so forth. The second thing here is the survey, where we are going to ask people for the different components how they envision this. And Yvonne, I realize we're not saying that we're going to include every one of those in stage one of what we're looking to do, but I think it's important, because even when we look at that individual marketplace, there are some of us that think that the primary parties that'll be selling things are AT&T and Lever Brothers.
Yeah, but we only have an hour and a half. I'm in the United States. I have work to do. You guys are in other, different countries, or doing different things, and so it's much different time difference. I have to get to a plane. So the point is that we can't. We just, and that's me talking selfishly here, but we can't talk 2 hours about all these extra stuff. We're all in agreement. We need to start. We need to figure out who wants to just work on this, what are the areas that need to be addressed, and just find that marketplace, and just get started. Okay. And then create the list of the concerns, because I have a whole bunch from my finance side.
Well, this is
I have all these
exactly why
concerns.
that's the kind of comments that I'm looking for the next one, where when we talk about the marketplace itself, what are we looking for? Are we looking for a marketplace for the biggest 100 corporations of the world to be the primary participants in, and everybody else buys from those 100 biggest companies? Or those kinds of questions that we need to look. We need to ask ourselves, okay, how do we make that decision to say what products and services are going to be allowed in there? There still has to be a process.
But that's when you develop it. But the thing is, this is local. Somebody in you're not creating economic opportunity if somebody is in Bosnia, I don't know, some village in Bosnia making batteries, and he has to compete. The point is that let's just start the marketplace. Let's start putting in the questions. And yes,
that's what I'm saying. That we're gonna
and I'm a big believer in compromise and making things work. And so, yes, maybe we do need some large institutional players, and we have to leave room for smaller institutional players. But who's going to come to the plate? Does Microsoft, does some major corporation want to jump in and sell their Crest toothpaste? Does that make sense to sell Crest toothpaste?
Yvonne, you made a really good point about the players. We always mention American players. We don't mention other players. Like there's a huge financing group in Africa named M-Pesa. They're doing tremendous financing work through mobile telephone. So we have to be careful of always just saying US-based companies as well, to make it global, I mean. I know there's a bias against American companies in terms of that they're well known and stuff, but it's not the well known we're going for. It's who will provide the best equitable service
And
for
I
everyone.
I want to just share one thing with you guys. So there's education for education for employment, or I also entrepreneurship. It's for the Middle East and different Middle East countries, and each one is individual, and they help individuals get jobs and blah blah blah. It's a little more complicated than and more interesting and exciting than I'm making it sound right now, but they're very customized. So I was on a literally 150-foot yacht by the owner of the yacht and this organization that's making a difference in the world because they care. Okay. And it's not a Muslim or not an Arab or a Muslim person. It's just somebody who cares about the world. Okay, let's just leave it that. I just wanted to give you some background. The evening was for donors and different people to learn. I was there with the the ambassador of Jordan, and this is and literally with a lot of finance people and different people, literally, and a lot of nonprofits and stuff, NGOs. His question was, why isn't there more economy in my country? And it was like the most dumbest, not to put him down because he's a lovely person, but it was the ignorance of these large countries. It was because he couldn't understand what was the reason. Whereas one NGO, which actually she has obscene amount of her own money, she said because you do not allow for like an Etsy type of business or some local capable business. You give tax deductions to all these large institutions, and you do not support and you make it too, the tax is too high for the local community. So anyway, we can have multiple conversations about this stuff, but I just wanted you to realize that we just need to start this marketplace and give people the opportunity to develop and grow their economic development. And we could give room for large institutions, but we focus on giving people the power to create.
Okay.
So Bill, I want to interject real quick. I think that the first step we could do, because I know you mentioned committee, I think that we form that committee first, and from that committee, we start working on that marketplace. That's all I want to interject real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think getting a formal structure here so that different groups have goals and have timelines and plans. This is really important so that we have measurable progress. Because I think everybody there is a certain frustration here that why aren't we moving? Why haven't we done this? And this is where I think we need to get to that point where we look at the marketplace specifically. Let's just take that one example, and we sit down and say, okay, what issues might exist out there that we have to make decisions about. Are we making it primarily for the top 100 companies in the world, or are we making it for the local communities primarily, or and then how it would work and how do they fit together, and are we making a platform, or are we just making a sort of a platform where we can have 10,000 local community marketplaces that just share the same physical platform? I built one like that for e-commerce a number of years back, where we had over 3,000 retail outfits in the eastern half of the United States that just used our platform because it enabled them to put products into and do the servicing and get their all their shipping requirements and everything else. But they were all totally independent. They managed their own e-commerce store. They just shared our platform. So we need to have some questions and answers on that to get that detailed. And that's something that committee then can take and package it and say, fine, here's the proposal. We've actually come to 3 proposals, and this is the pros and cons of this one. This is the pros and cons of that one. And then we can come and move forward with a proposal we've agreed on. Hey, that's what we're going to do now for the pilot, and we can start to move forward. And part of that is going to be, okay, if we select option B, what are the implications when we start talking about the other aspects, such as the currency, such as the supplemental income and all these things? What are the implications? Is B more easy or more difficult to plug items like that in later? We need to know that, because otherwise we can spend a lot of time and effort going down a path that in the end is a dead end. And that we don't want to do
You
it.
just design it so that it can be plugged in generally. It doesn't have to show up on the front page. You
Right.
know, like so. I mean, that to me is a techno. You can do that technology.
It is, but it's
So it's
not equally easy, Joan. That there's can be huge differences in how easy that you can plug certain things into different solutions, especially if we're not developing it ourselves, which I don't think we want to do. We want to leverage. There's just so many
so
solutions
you
out
tell the
there.
person that's developing it, here are some of the things that we'll be looking at for the future.
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying. Make the pathway for that to
I
happen.
don't think we're going to have anybody developing it. I think we're going to take something off the shelf that exists already.
I'm just saying for the if we want to have the big vision and then the pilot,
Yeah.
it can be done.
Yeah.
To me, I guess maybe I don't see things as problems. There's always someone that can solve it. So in terms of our agenda, we got down to number 4. You were in the middle of saying the next steps, which is to formalize a committee. So we need to do something that people can respond to by next week, that they're on the committee, and we can talk about that. Number 5, I think number 5, we need to visit and agree on the goals of the pilot. And these are maybe some of them, they're the sub ones, but I think that we need to actually have conversations about number 5 maybe next week after we formalize the committee. And the survey, I think that we also need to ask some qualifying questions about the answers from the survey, because some of them were like arbitrary. Yes, we need a supplementary income. Okay, so how is that going to happen? Tell us. Things like that. Get people to not just say yes or no, yes, we need it, or why we don't need it. How do you see it working? What are you like? A lot of people can say lots of things, but they don't contribute to anything.
Yeah.
So it's I'm not looking for people who are giving ideas anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend 5 years talking about this. I want to spend 5 months implementing it.
No, I think that's a valid point, and I think what's very important
questions in between. We've been doing a huge amount of talking to get through 4 elements, but why can't we then make up and have sort of a questionnaire going out, getting the answers to the other things so that we've got them, so that we can move on to action at the next
That's exactly what I think Joan was also saying here, that we need to go find out who's willing to be on the committee and what capacity they see themselves, and B, to get real concrete suggestions of what people envision, how people envision different aspects working, especially with regards to the marketplace. So that we can move forward on that. And as far as the primary goals of the pilot, I think this is really crucial, because if we're saying, hey, our goal is to make the pilot a worldwide system, and having support of the UN or bodies like that are important, we have to ask the question and saying, what do we need the pilot to provide evidence of to support the selling of that strategy? So I think that's important, and I'll try to incorporate into the survey a question or two in that direction to get people's thoughts as to what we want the pilot to prove. What does it need to prove to support the strategy?
to show that we can implement the SIFA plan. I mean, wasn't that sort of
yeah, but the question is, what aspects of the SIFA plan?
All of the aspects except for the global self-financing. There's just 3 main aspects.
Well, the one that we just sort of agreed that we would push back for now is the sociocratic decision making.
Well, there's the sociocratic decision making, there's the personal growth element, there's the marketplace, and then there's the self-financing.
Supplemental income.
So we cannot do the self-financing in the way that Koistra thought of it. That doesn't work. But we can make it self-financing. There are lots of self-financing projects around. The LET system is self-financing, and that's practiced at least in 60 countries. So, you know, there are lots of self-financing ways one can use, but we can't use the specific way that Koistrup has wanted
You're talking about the pilot.
in the pilot, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, but the question is really when we look here and say, what is our strategy for going from a pilot to having a global, the full implementation? The question is, what's our strategy? What's our plan for how we would accomplish that? And therefore, how does the pilot contribute to supporting that strategy for achieving eventually the entire plan? That's what is meant by point 5.
Can I send you an article on that? I did actually write an article on
Yes,
that.
please. And I will share that here. Maybe I'll even be able to include that as a link in the survey.
Oh, great. Yes. Okay.
Well, I have an appointment at
Yes,
12
and
o'clock.
I
and so-
also I apologize. We are over the time limit that I had hoped here to complete in 90 minutes. We're 98 minutes right now. So that unless somebody has something here really key to say, I will try to get this video posted here more quickly than last week. And with a I don't know here if this thing made that summary here for me, but I'll at least get the video out to everybody with an outline of what we'll try to accomplish between now and next week in terms of getting out surveys or the kinds of questions and so forth, so that there'll be some expectation on that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, a great meeting. Really good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bill,
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bill.
very
Bill.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Thank you.
Bye.